The live stream started just as I was saying, you hot flashers. Oopsie. Oopsie. All right, so last week we started the series, The 5 Love Languages. And of course, last week we spent taking the survey. Did any of you download the Love Nudge app? I love the name of it, Love Nudge. I'm going to download it and link up with David so I can nudge him. And I feel like the nudge ought to be a sledgehammer. Boo! But if you do download that app, the first thing it's going to ask you to do is go ahead and take that survey one more time. It'll be the electronic version. And so just answer those questions, go through it, and we'll pop up the chart like this, like both my wife and I have, because we did the online version last week. And so, like I said, and you can link up with your spouse on the Love Nudge and send out little text. That's what it is, a little love nudge. Just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. And it's kind of a help for marriage. It's a marriage help app. And so there's this thing called, and I think I have it right, it's called the Love Tank. And you can get your love tank filled. And so you send a nudge, and it like fills up your little tank. You receive the nudge, it fills up your little tank. And so it's helpful. It might be fun to get in and mess around with and try. But if you need some serious help with your marriage, you have a pastor, and you have the Word of God, and your pastor will share with you the Word of God and help you through it. And I have survived 41 years. Let me rephrase that. My wife has survived 41 years. We were just talking, we were talking to somebody, and we were saying, they were asking how many kids that she had, and she said, well, I have 2 boys, and then I chimed in, and she's raising the 3rd one. He's never going to leave. And so just want to let you know that there is that help. So you don't necessarily need to go to the app. However, the app will be helpful. If you really have need for some marriage help, you can certainly get together with me and my wife, and we'll tell you the secrets. And I heard somebody say the secret to their marriage was they went out to dinner twice a week. He went on Tuesdays, she went on Fridays. Yes, that's it right there. That is it. All right, and so all of that was introduction. Let you know, last week we did the survey. You guys know what your love language is, and now we're going to start going through each one of them. And the first one that we start out with is the words of affirmation. The love language of words of affirmation. And that word affirmation just means good job. Woohoo! You do so great. And we're going to start out in Proverbs chapter 12 in the scriptures. And so if you would, go ahead and open your Bibles to Proverbs chapter number 12. And we're looking again at words of affirmation. And I feel like I preached some of this, or the majority of this, on Sunday morning in the message to the ladies. Do you remember, men, when the ladies would say, I'm fine? You guys remember that part? Or wanting to know what was for dinner? Well, what would you like for dinner? Anything's good. Well, I feel like fried chicken. No, I don't feel like fried chicken. Well, what would you like? Oh, anything's fine. Well, I feel like fried chicken. No, not. That was a literal conversation that a friend of ours had years and years and years ago, and I still remember it. He wanted Walmart fried chicken, and she did not, but she wouldn't tell him what he wanted. And so I feel like I've preached most of words of affirmation on Sunday morning. So we'll just have a little review tonight. We'll have a couple of other quotes from the book on this to help us out on how we can speak correctly and helpfully and lovingly. So Proverbs chapter 12, and we'll look at verse 25. Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 25. Heaviness in the heart of man maketh it stoop, but a good word maketh it glad. And so if you're down, then a good word from your spouse or a friend or somebody will make it glad. And so, again, that's one. Now you're in Proverbs 12. Let's go to Proverbs 18. Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 21. Proverbs chapter 18 and verse number 21. And it says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. So what is in the power of the tongue? Death and life. I've heard stories, I've read news stories and heard news stories and things like that where people's words cause other people to take their own lives. Especially with young people. They'll get bullied in school, and because of the tongues of their classmates, they go home and they take their own life. So the death and life are in the power of the tongue. I've also heard people just speak to somebody at the point of suicide and talk them down from it, and now they live a productive and fruitful life. And so there is power in the tongue, and we need to be careful on how we use it. And since we're talking about love language and marriage, we really need to be careful how we use it in the marriage. And that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. So the love language of words of affirmation, it's not just what we say, it's how we say it. That reminds me of an illustration years ago. In our home church, my wife and I were still members of our home church. And we had a guest speaker. Dr. John Halsey was preaching. And in the illustration, he was speaking about getting a dozen roses. The wife walks into the kitchen. If I remember right, I think this was 10, 13 years ago that I heard this. No, it was more than that. The woman walks into the kitchen, and on the kitchen is that box. It's about that long, it's about that high, it's about that wide. And most ladies know what comes in a box about that size, right? And so the wife comes in and she sees the box and she's thinking, hey, I know what's in that box. And the husband walks in and says something like this: there's those stinking flowers you've been nagging me about. All right? And so, getting the flowers, was that not a good action? Putting the box in the kitchen, was that not a good action? But as soon as the husband spoke up, so Dr. Halsey is speaking, and what happens is my wife and I, we would sit on this side of the church, and we're in the second row down there, and it was a little bit further than there. But Dr. Halsey turned this way when he spoke, and he said, and Terry Sugar, what would you do with those flowers? And my wife really didn't hear what he said. She said, man, I love flowers, so I would enjoy those flowers. She missed that whole part with
the way it was presented.
And so when he said, oh, really? So if John came in there and said, there's those stinking flyers that you've been nagging at me about, you would receive them? She's like, no. If he said that, I'd be putting them down to garbage disposal. I'd be feeding that garbage disposal. So it's not what we do, and it's not even really what we say, but how. Right? We'll get into that in just a moment, a little bit more on the how and things like that. We're going to talk about 3 dialects of the words of affirmation. Remember I told you there's major languages, but then in that language group there are dialects. And I mentioned up in English, we have a bunch, don't we? If I say something like, I'm going to pack the car, where do you think I'm coming from? Yeah, Boston, Jersey, right? If you start adding R's to it, I'm going to go wash the car. Where am I? Yeah, I'm in Texas, right? I'm in the South. If the color red has more than 1 syllable, what state am I in, Tangi? Tennessee. Red. Or North Carolina. Yeah, Kentucky, anything like that. When we were in North Carolina, that color red was red. Right? And then it's like there's a syllable after the D too, duh. Red. Right? You gotta get that in there. They just don't understand what you're saying. They would say there's something wrong with how you're saying that. And we used to live in Rutherfordton County. Okay? Rutherfordton County. We add syllables to a short word, but we take out syllables on a long word. So we lived in Ruffton County. All right, it's Ruffton County. In North Carolina, when I was going to Bible school, we lived in Ruffton County, which was Rutherfordton. And Rayed. And I had a job there working on computer systems, and I was sent out to Far City.
I lived in Columbus, Mississippi.
Well, Far City, my boss said it's almost exactly 20 miles down the road, and you'll see the exit for Far City. 20 miles down the road, I'm looking at my odometer, and I see the exit for Forest City. This is about, I think it's my first week in North Carolina. I've been there for a week. And I said to myself in my car, I said this, if I lived in North Carolina and I spoke North Carolinian, how would I say Forest City? Forest City. Took that exit, followed his directions, and sure enough, there was the company right there, and I was able to do the work. So we're just saying that to mention with English, there are dialects. Right? Same thing with this love language. There are dialects. The first one we're going to look at under words of affirmation is the dialect of encouraging words. Encouraging words. And I pulled this quote out of the book. All of us have areas in which we feel insecure. We lack courage, and that lack of courage often hinders us from accomplishing the positive things that we would like to do. But if somebody would come along and give us an encouraging word. The illustration in the book was this one woman, ironically enough, was a writer. And she tried to publish a paper, and the first paper that she tried to publish failed, so she put down the pen. She never wrote again. Some 20 years later, the husband says, hey, I've been reading some of the stuff that you've been putting out, and that's some really good stuff. And the wife said, you really think so? Because she would write it and then stick it in a box. And she'd say, you really think so? He's like, yeah, that's really good stuff. I would read it. And so she started sending her things into publishers again. And not only did she have papers published, but she's on her third book being published because somebody came along with encouraging words and said, in an area where they were insecure, no, you can do that. You got it. You can do that. So we ought to try working on encouraging words. What would be a discouraging word in that? Well, you tried it once, and it failed then. What makes you? What do you think's changed? That's not very encouraging, is it? So let's practice in our marriages being encouraging, saying encouraging things. Like now to John, I would have to say encouraging things about his writing. That John. Something like, hey, I'm really enjoying that story on Skald. Tell me the name again. Ein something? Einherjar. He wrote a little, it's a Viking name. It's a, Norse name. But it's a character story, so you get a little background on one character that's in his book. I like that character in the book. I'm enjoying this one. It's really well written. I like it. Don't do it again. Oh no, you see, he's working on novel number 3 now. So novel number 3. And the encouraging word would be, I really need to hear the rest of the story. I really need to get, tell me how this ends. I got to, I'm chomping at the bit. I put down the first book, and it made me want to pick up the second book. So those are like encouraging words, but we ought to be that with our spouses.
This is a good sandwich. You should make me another one.
I'm getting to that in a second. The second dialect we're going to be talking about is similar. It's kind words. We can say kind words. You're in Proverbs 18. Let's look at Proverbs 15. Proverbs 15. Proverbs 15 and verse number 1, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. And those grievous words would be unkind, and a soft answer would be kind words. So a kind or a soft answer turneth away wrath. And so we need to learn to speak the dialect of kind language or kind words one to another. And then the author wrote this. By the way, the author is Gary Chapman, Dr. Gary Chapman. So these quotes are coming from him, just so you know I'm not plagiarizing this stuff. I'm amazed by how many individuals mess up every new day with yesterday. They insist on bringing into today the failures of yesterday, and in so doing, they pollute a potentially wonderful day. You jerk. Wake up first thing in the morning, you jerk. You remember what you did to me yesterday? Well, you've just messed up today. Right? And so this guy that's been studying this for decades. I'm amazed how many individuals mess up every new day with yesterday. You know what he's trying to say there? Sufficient is the day, or the evil of the day. You don't need to be bringing up yesterday, and you certainly don't need to be worrying about tomorrow. Right? So we need to speak kind words. Wake up every morning with a kind word. Wake up every morning with soft answers. Wake up every morning encouraging. not bubbly. Don't be, I'm not telling you to change your whole personality and be Bubbles if you're not Bubbles. But if you are Bubbles, then be bubbly. My wife and I came across somebody, and I forget where we saw this girl, but she was hyped up on something. She had one too many Monsters. She had one too many espresso shots. She had one too many Cokes. She had one too many something, but she was just bouncing all over the place, and I was like, right? You don't have to change and do that, but you can certainly change and speak encouraging and kind words first thing in the morning. All right, and the third dialect and last one that we're going to be looking at tonight is the dialect of humble words. Humble words. How we speak to one another is important. I'm going to give you two phrases. You tell me which one sounds best. All right, and this is hitting on what John was just saying a minute ago. You could say something like this: could you make that pasta dish that I like? Or you could say something like, can't we ever get a decent meal around here?
Yeah, really.
So here's what would happen in my house. The box of pasta would come flying at me. The can of tomato sauce would come flying at me. And a pound of hamburger or something.
Solid frozen hamburger.
Yes, frozen.
Have at it.
I remember this. This was another illustration. Speaking of almost the same thing, the woman plopped down in front of him a frozen steak, a head of lettuce, and said, "There's your steak and salad." Ladies, you can identify with this. Do you think it would be possible for you to clean the gutters this weekend? Or you could say, if you don't get those gutters cleaned out soon, they're going to fall off the house. They already have trees growing out of them. So of the two, which one do you think would get the best reaction?
The first one, obviously.
All right, now I'm sorry if you're hearing yourself in these. I wrote these directly out of the book.
It's funny.
Right? So if we change it, the humbleness here, or the humility here that we're talking about is, instead of making it a command or a nag, and by the way, men can nag too. Can we get a decent meal in this house? That's not the way my mom made it.
That's the worst thing to say.
Whoa, you want to talk about dying soon.
Yes.
I told you this too in a marriage seminar that my wife and I went to. They did a video where the pastor was a former mortician. And so they did a whole video, and this was one of them. He was going to say something like, that's not how and the wife said to him, say it! And he said, that's not how my mother makes it! And then the next scene, you see him laying in the casket, and they're playing the death song. And so how we say things really matter. And so, again, instead of saying things in a derogatory manner, can you finally get to that? Now, sometimes my wife, she has to get that way with me. I'm kidding. But we've had a project on the books for 2 years, and we finally got it done.
She posted it on
Yeah, you guys saw it, right?
yeah.
We painted around the front of the garage, which was really bad. We painted the side of the house, which was really bad. And then on the back, we painted and then put on some of that rock thing. And she painted the barrel. She's the spray painter. She's the half Mexican in my house. She's done some spray paint art for our home church. She did big murals with spray cans, and we always tease her she's the half Mexican in the house. She's doing graffiti art. So she did the rain barrel, but that project had been on the books for 2 years. And we had been focusing here. And so she just said, hey, let's take a break at the church and let's finish this project. And that's what we did. It was not nagging. It was not anything. It was, hey, we've worked here. Let's focus now on this project, and then we can come back. And so it's a difference. Now, I do have to rat her out. I have a honey-do list. And if things have been on the list for a while, they get bolded. If things have been on the list after they've been bolded, it goes to all caps. And then if it goes to all caps and it's there for a while, it goes to red and all caps. And if it's still there, then all of a sudden there's great big black arrows pointing at all caps in red on my honey-do list. By the way, right now, the prayer letter is red and all caps. No arrow yet. So I've got the prayer letter done before the arrows. And really, there have been some things on that list that have been there for so long that it won't erase. It won't erase. And so, guys, that's a bad example. Okay, don't do what I do. Do as I say. I'm going to preach that way, and it's coming this way. Okay? But how we say things really matters. And here's the exact quote that says all of what I just said. A request creates the possibility for an expression of love, whereas a demand suffocates that possibility. Guys, if she mentioned 6 months ago that she would like you to paint the house, and then she mentions it again 6 months later, that's not nagging. Okay? Now, ladies, if you told him 30 minutes ago and you're saying it again, and then you say it again in 30 minutes, and then you say it again in 30 minutes after that, and then you say something like, if you don't take the trash out, the flies are going to take it out. Because then there will be enough flies there to be able to pick up the trash bag and take it out. All right, that's kind of nagging. So there is a difference. Guys, and by the way, I'm guilty on this. We seem to think that every time the wife mentions something or reminds us something that that's nagging. No. Okay? She mentioned 6 months ago that she wanted the house painted. Okay. Here we are 6 months later. Finally got it done. And so, I'm guilty of it too. If my wife was in here, and she's probably in the nursery going, and she can see me right now too, on the flat screen. It's not nagging if they're reminding you after a amount of time. But can I teach you a little bit of sign language? You know what the sign is for nagging? I want you to tell me if you know what this is picturing. This is nagging. Do you know what that's picturing? That's a woodpecker pecking into a tree. And you know how fast they go, right? That's the sign. That's American Sign Language for nagging. Okay? Don't do that, ladies. And guys, don't do the reverse of that. Okay? Don't be reverse nagging. You know, we talk about reverse discrimination. Don't be reverse nagging. All right, and so words of affirmation, it's not what we say, I love you. It's how we say it. Love you! Stinking woman, I told you when we got married. When it changes, I'll let you know. All right, said the same words, different way. Right? Okay. Did I scare the babies? I scared the babies. I do that all the time. She probably was doing that, wasn't she? Did I get Acacia too? No? Okay. She's used to it. She's been here for a while. So again, words of affirmation, what we say is important, but how we say it as well is important. And so we need to learn these dialects, the encouraging word, the kind words, the humble words. Let's close out with Proverbs chapter 25. Proverbs chapter 25 and verse number 11. Proverbs chapter 25 and verse number 11. And it says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver. Now, what in the world does that mean?
Sounds pretty well.
I used to think it was a picture. It was like a silver background and they painted on gold apples. But that's not what this is referring to. This is actually referring to having golden apples formed, made of pure gold in the shape of an apple and placed in a silver bowl. Now that's opulent, isn't it? And that would be a beautiful sight to behold, and the light reflecting off of that would be something beautiful to behold. Well, that's a word fitly spoken. Something beautiful to behold. And an opulent something. Could you imagine how much a golden apple would cost? Gold I think now is at $3,300 an ounce. And I feel like that if I was to make an apple the size of an apple, it would be at least a pound of gold. So 16 times $3,300 would be one, but we're talking about apples, so plural here. I'm thinking of a bowl, maybe 3 or 4. In a silver bowl, that's costly. That's opulent. That's something beautiful to behold. And again, a word fitly spoken is that same way. We say something right and in the right manner. It's like looking at these golden apples. By the way, not golden delicious, because that's not $3,300 an ounce. Golden apples in a silver bowl, and how beautiful that would be. Get that image in your mind, how beautiful that would be, and that is a word fitly spoken. And you know what? You can speak those kind of words. You can be that, excuse the term, beautiful with how you say and what you say. And so again, we're talking about the love language of words of affirmation here. And so if that's your love language, then you are pretty good with these words of affirmation. By the way, let me give you a phrase that really irritates me that sounds like a word of affirmation. Appreciate you.
It has to be a different tone.
That irritates me. I appreciate what you've done for me. You don't even know me. How can you appreciate me?
Right.
Somebody just appreciate you. No. That has become an irritant.
That's an off-the-cuff type remark.
Now, I appreciate it is something different. Right? The thing that was done, I appreciate that. Maybe I'm old school, but how many of you guys ever watched Wheel of Fortune back in the old days when Pat Sajak was there are some things that really irritated him being the host of that show. You know what one of them was? I'd like to buy the E.
Yeah. Y instead of N-E.
Yes, I want to buy the E. He said that really irritated him. You know what really irritates me, almost to that level, is that. So if you appreciate something that I do for you, say I appreciate it. The thing. Okay? Just want to let you know. Words of affirmation. Let's speak them correctly. All right, questions or comments about what